it's changed my game in many ways. I suppose the thing that AI has done to my game that I'll say I wasn't able to do without AI is maybe like a more specific way to answer, is it has allowed me to be confident in simplification as quickly as possible. So the way that I used to use a lot of training tools, I would spend days or weeks like iterating and adjusting and learning how different parameters and different settings to the software would change the solution. And AI has all of this information learned previously. So it's just in the way that it works is so much more informative, right? Like it on the macro scale. It's so much more informative on the macro scale. Well, I guess when I'm thinking about creating the whole strategy, I'm thinking about kind of sorting through the nuance, right? Like sorting through all of the what I might think are unnecessary details in an individual hand. So any of these types of programs could inform you. For example, let's say, something I talk a lot about in my coaching is that human execution is difficult. Complicated strategies make executing very difficult. So right now, there's no simple way without AI to tell a solver that you would like to simplify in the same manner everywhere. Like you would like your strategy to have not just one bet size, but like, let's say you wanted to describe it. You wanted to say, I like to play polarized strategies. I mean, PO Solver doesn't know what that means. PO Solver just knows what the bet sizes are and how the game is played, like the rules of the game, right? But when I think about developing whole strategies, I think about combining the human element of understanding strategies with the computational, excellence of these tools. You can at least in the future, I don't think any tools are doing this right now, but you can kind of teach it like, hey, the way I think about this spot is that I like to bluff with equity out of position, or the way I think about this spot is I like to, block bet because my opponents don't raise enough or whatever. Like all of these kind of human ways of describing things, it's complicated to set that up on the micro level on individual solutions. But for entire strategies, if you can set this up on the macro level, then you make a huge difference to your end result, right? Like to your overall game. So much more clarity over what you're trying to do. This is like what I was using so many different tools in combination to try and accomplish this in the past, to try and have clarity over my whole strategy, simplified versions of that whole strategy, all of it making sense to my human brain. It's a big task using the previous generation of tools. Yeah, I mean, with the overbets that you're describing, I mean, some of the spots, this I guess was, in reference to the Run It Once videos that I was doing, I was finding that 200 big blinds deep, so like very, very deep stacked, the geometric sizes, the geometric overbets were still showing up, even when that meant betting 4 times the pot on the flop, or 2.5 times the pot on the flop, or whatever it is. I think that, yeah, like the things I'm seeing, well, I guess the specific things that I'm seeing were in that video series. The specific things I'm seeing is kind of what you've described, like bet sizing you don't see from anyone else, bet sizing you don't see from humans. What I guess it points to me that I'm excited to learn about is it's the flexibility of what types of spots we can get answers to. Because I think it was, at least for me, the way that I used PO Solver and other programs in the past, it was hard to get deep stack solutions with bet sizing specificity because each individual solution took so much longer. and to go through the whole process of testing bet sizes and trying to figure out the best play at 200 big blinds or eventually at 400 big blinds, which some people are playing quite often, it's hard to get those answers, and it's hard to get them with precision. So these are the types of things that I'm thinking, okay, well, now this is going to be possible very quickly, to get correct bet sizing for scenarios that are quite difficult to replicate in the typical program. I know a lot of people that I've talked to are excited about trying to figure out bomb pots, for example, or trying to figure out, a variety of anti-structures, right? Like the types of flexibility that is, when there's a big time constraint on your solutions, it's just something you decide, like, oh, I'm not going to bother. Like, I'm not going to start learning, large anti-format 400 big blind straddle or whatever. Like, I'll just guess. I'll just approximate it something else. Like, now I'm seeing, oh, there's going to be potential with these programs to just solve anything. Yeah, I mean, over the last couple of years as a coach, I've definitely found myself as someone who is very process oriented. And a lot of what I teach my students has always been about my approach to learning, my approach to studying, my approach to playing sessions, to executing all of these things. I found that this is what I'm better prepared for than most players, and what often at any level players often need help with. So that's no different now. It's just that I'm using different tools personally, right? I mean, the way that I study is changing, and that means the way that I teach others how to study effectively is changing. It hasn't happened all at once. It's not a huge overhaul. Like, I didn't throw away my PO Solver license. Like, I still use kind of everything that I feel I need to use. But there's, more and more I'm finding that there's situations that are not only easier to use in a browser tool or with an AI tool, but it's also more effective. So anytime I unlock that, anytime I find like a new efficiency or a new, training technique that I think is a little bit better, I want to show my students. I want to make content around it, because that's what I think I'm good at as a teacher. Well, definitely the biggest leaks are, and if I'm thinking about the most costly leaks that I'm running into regularly, it still tends to be a lack of aggression and a tendency to fold. Just like very broadly speaking, right? Like, I think it's intimidating, or it's I don't know, unfamiliar for a lot of players to bluff a lot, to play generally aggressive strategies, to fight aggression with aggression. These don't come naturally for a lot of players. I think there's still a ton of poker players who have made most of their success by having the best hand against a bad player, and just getting paid with the best hand against a bad player. And these opportunities are going away over time. But the opportunity to be an aggressive winner, and the opportunity to kind of play, well, less the opportunity to be aggressive is still there. It's still very good. On the flip side of this, you're seeing more and more aggression from the field. You're seeing more and more aggression from the average player. So it's also becoming more and more important to play quality defense, right? To be willing to bluff catch, to be willing to check raise, to be willing to, and I still see a lot of hesitation around these concepts. With the typical player, I would say that's the most costly leak that I run into. It's not necessarily like the biggest theoretical misunderstanding, or the biggest like gap in knowledge, or gap in execution, or whatever it is. It's just the thing that is costing people money most often, is they just play too tight, they play too passive. I mean, I'm definitely someone who pushes to find what are the things that player is not exploring in their game, or what are they not using, like what are they not utilizing to improve. So there's so many methods and so many areas to focus on. It can be easy to just get stuck in like your routine, where all you do is, let's say all you do is run hand histories through the solver every session, and you work really hard because you spend 3 hours every night running sims every night on the hands that you played. but that's the only thing you ever do to work on your game, eventually you're going to hit a wall, and eventually you're not going to improve beyond that point because you're not working on your thought process, you're not working on your execution, you're not working on your understanding of the player pool, right? Like there's so many variables that go into a winning high stakes player. And I think a lot of people don't work in that kind of variety. They don't mix up their study, they don't mix up their perspectives, they don't, give credit to players who play differently than them and try and figure out why they're doing well. I'm big on taking in all the perspectives. I'm big on trying new things, varying your study, varying your play style, right? Like basically just exploring. And I think most high stakes players who not just win, but like survive, like the high stakes players who really stay and feel confident in winning are the ones who are the most adaptable, the most confident, the most complete poker players, right? Like they can do a bit of everything. They're not stuck in one particular route. This has changed over time for me. I think that warm-ups are important, but I don't think there's like one magic warm-up for everyone. I've been finding lately, because I play tournament no limit mostly. I play no limit MTTs. The pre-flop game is very complicated. The pre-flop game is different from what I used to play. So I personally get a lot of value out of spending 15 minutes playing a pre-flop trainer before I start my session, because it's pretty natural now, but it's not as good as I would like it to be. I'm holding myself to a pretty high standard when it comes to executing. So that's what I have found is like the most productive warm up for me. And what happens before that is, like just general well-being and healthy lifestyle. Like there's no particular thing that I'm going to say, like, this is what you need to do to start your morning. Cause it depends when you play and what your surroundings are like and, what motivates you and all this. But basically just, I want to feel good when I play. And then I like to do a little bit of pre-flop warm up, because that's what's beneficial for me right now. But that's not what I've always done. That's maybe been the last like 6 months, 6 to 12 months. Yeah, I mean, when I intake a new student, I do try to get familiar with what tools they've already gotten comfortable with, or like what types of learning um, has worked for them, so that I can make the best recommendation for like what they need next. Um, but I would say that it's very necessary to have a training tool and a study tool. And that doesn't have to be the same product, but it could be if you're using a product that offers both. So for example, some players who have been using all the software for a long time, they use PO Solver, and they use the trainer in PO Solver. I think that's great. And maybe the only thing it's missing is a good pre-flop trainer, because PO Solver pre-flop is constrained to 2 players. So, maybe I would suggest to them, as long as they play something other than heads up, maybe I would tell them to use some extra tool like a pre-flop academy or a GTO wizard or something that has a pre-flop trainer that they can subscribe to, right? And that would be a good complete set. But I think you need something to study pre-flop and train pre-flop. You need something to study post-flop and train post-flop. Again, like the particular brand, the particular style, this is sort of up to the player. But I like to make sure with all of my students, they've got something in place to work on all those things, depending on where they're at in their process. Doesn't have to be the very best tool. Yeah, I would say, I mean, but before I associate it directly with a attribute, I would say the variance in our game is crazy. And I think people frequently get attached to survivorship bias, which is natural. They frequently see the winning players or the people who made it, and they think, oh, they must be doing something different. They must be doing something right. This isn't always the case in our game. There's a ton of variance, especially if you're a tournament poker player. There's a ton of variance. So I think in some cases it's just the brutal reality of like that player didn't get the opportunity and the other one did. That could be the case. Now, let's put that aside, and because if you want to make it in poker, like if your sole aspiration is to be a better poker player, then you have to take responsibility for your results. You can't sit around and say, "Oh, it's variance. I'm so unlucky. The reason that I'm the losing player is because of variance." If you take this attitude, it will be true, and you will be a losing player. So I think if I was going to attribute something to the person itself, it would be more on this mental side. It would be about how they approach losing, how they approach improving. The winning players are very self-critical. They're always asking questions. Even though they're winning, they're trying to get better. Even though they have success, they're doubting their plays. I think this is the mentality of a long-term winning player, because they know that continuous growth is necessary to continually compete. And it's never good enough, right? Someone else is always working harder. It's never good enough. I think that's a big differentiator. A lot of the players who struggle to lose long-term, they insult other players' strategies. They get down on themselves about their luck. I mean, I know this is circumstantial to some extent. It's very hard to break out of this because some of that might be true. I mean, some of that, like it's based in reality, but I think just the winning players have this ability to separate themselves from their circumstances and just continue to work positively, continue to push forward, continue to take responsibility for that work. I would say that's the biggest difference. Yeah, I think the direction of these tools, I mean, like the obvious answer is that we're moving away from hardware and software, and we're moving on to the cloud, right? So using your phone or your browser for everything is going to be possible very soon. And it's not going to be necessary in the future to rent servers, to have expensive hardware setups, to run solutions. And I think this is great because it relieves the financial barrier, or the tech savvy, barrier, or whatever you want to call it, to using advanced tools. So I think the mobile programs are going to keep getting really, really good. The browser-based programs are going to keep getting really, really good. In terms of actual features, I mean, this extends to everything, right? This includes hand importing. And if that includes hand importing, that means database tracking. So database tracking means personalized feedback. It means everything that, again, like the stuff that I used to work pretty hard as a coach and as a player to keep track of myself and to keep on my hard drive and to turn into Excel spreadsheets and all this nonsense. Like it's a lot of work, and it's just going to get easier. And depending on the future of online poker itself, I think will determine like how advanced those tools can get. Because I think the sites that are running these tools now are ready for everything, right? Like they're ready to push the technology towards being able to do everything you would possibly need it to do. I think a big question mark in my mind is, how big will online poker still be when all of this comes? Will they cooperate with these training sites? Because now you have very advanced tools and a whole bunch of online sites who are very concerned about cheating and very concerned about the progress of, bots and AI. So I do think it's going to be important for them to collaborate in some way. I hope that doesn't slow down the technological progress in some way. I hope we don't get to a point where these tools get so good and then all the sites just cut them off. But I think that at least in the case of Ruse and hopefully in the case of these other programs, I know that, we plan to not only like cooperate when it comes to keeping online games clean, but maybe even further that process, right? Like help contribute in a way to strengthen security and to strengthen checking systems and make online poker more exciting and more fun, more competitive. Maybe this is a pipe dream, but I do think that that's possible. But that's, that in my mind, that would be the only thing that would hold you back from whatever you could imagine a browser-based tool being at this point.